So I was scrolling through Twitter the other day when I randomly came across a video of Mr. Cheeks. Now I know that's probably a name some of y'all haven't heard in a while, but I saw him performing with Little Kim on 106 in Park, and immediately my mind went to The Lost Boy, specifically Renee, a song by The Lost Boys. So I went back and listened to it. Then I watched the music video, and it reminded me of something I hadn't really thought about in a long time. We don't really get songs like this anymore. Not because today's artists aren't talented. Well, that's kind of up for debate. But not because every song from the 90s was automatically better, but because somewhere along the way, hip hop stopped rewarding storytelling the way it once did. At least when it comes to mainstream success outside of a handful of artists. And I genuinely think that's become one of hip hop's greatest lost arts. What makes Renee so incredible isn't simply that it's a tragic story, it's how effortlessly it pulls you into its world. Mr. Cheeks doesn't rush anything. He introduces you to Renee, he tells you how they met, he lets you witness the flirting, the conversations, the chemistry, the excitement of meeting someone who genuinely catches your attention. And by the time the song reaches its climax, you've become emotionally invested. You are rooting for them at this point. Then everything changes. Renee dies. And your reaction isn't, wow, that's crazy. It's, I can't believe Renee died. Think about that. You spent 4 minutes with a fictional character, yet somehow you feel like you lost someone you actually knew. Then the music video adds another layer. Now Renee has a face, a smile, body language, chemistry. She no longer feels fictional. She feels very real. And that's masterful storytelling. What also stood out to me is that records like Renee weren't necessarily the norm when it came to relationships in hip hop. A lot of songs about women back then centered around sex, conquest, and disrespect. So hearing a rapper sincerely talk about meeting a woman he genuinely admired, wanting something deeper, being vulnerable, it immediately grabbed your attention because it felt different. The goal wasn't to shock you. The goal was to make you care. And now, before somebody jumps in my comments talking about, well, Monie, you're just being nostalgic. No, this isn't about nostalgia. This is about songwriting. Hip hop used to reward artists for taking listeners on a journey. Think about some of the greatest storytelling records ever made. Slick Rick gave us Children's Story. Tupac gave us Brenda's Got a Baby. Nas gave us I Gave You Power, where he literally rapped from the perspective of a gun. The Notorious B.I.G. gave us I Got a Story to Tell. Eminem gave us Stan. Shit, Jay-Z has records like Meet the Parents, You Must Love Me, In Front or Foe, where every verse builds tension like you're watching a movie unfold. These weren't just songs. They had characters, conflict, plot twists, resolution, beginning, middle, and end. The beat mattered, but the pen came first. And this wasn't exclusive to male rappers. Female MCs have contributed some of the most emotionally powerful storytelling records this genre has ever heard. Take Eve's Love is Blind. What's so heartbreaking about that record is knowing it wasn't just some random fictional idea. It was inspired by the abuse of one of Eve's close friends. So while the song itself tells a story, it's rooted in very real pain. She doesn't just tell you domestic violence exists. She places you inside the relationship. You watch the abuse escalate. You feel the fear. You feel the helplessness. You feel the heartbreak. That's storytelling with purpose. And then you have Little Kim's Aunt Dot. Again, characters, family dynamic, conflict, emotion, beginning, middle, end. And I also have to mention Kash Dolls for Everybody. To me, that's one of the best storytelling records from the last decade. The way she unfolds that relationship, the betrayal, the emotions, the perspective, it's incredible writing. Unfortunately, it never received the mainstream attention I believe it deserved, whether that was label issues, lack of promotion, or simply the climate of today's industry, I don't know. But it deserved far more recognition than it got. That's why I push back whenever people say women in rap don't tell stories. They absolutely do. Sometimes the audience just doesn't reward those records the same way they reward the club record. So what changed? changed. Personally, I don't think artists suddenly forgot how to write. I think the business changed. Streaming, playlists, TikTok, algorithms, attention spans. There was a time when artists wanted you to experience an album from the beginning to end. Now, the incentive is often to create songs that immediately fit into playlists or grab your attention within the first 15 seconds. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Music evolves. Every generation deserves its own sound, but playlist music and storytelling music usually have different objectives. One will ask, how quickly can I grab your attention? The other asks, can I keep your attention long enough to tell you something you'll never forget? Those are two completely different creative goals. And now, to be fair, storytelling isn't dead. It's just become far less common. Kendrick Lamar continues to prove that concept record can still exist at the highest level. People often point to Sing About Me or Duckworth, but look at his more recent work. Reincarnated places Kendrick inside multiple lifetimes, using reincarnation as a vehicle to explore ego, violence, accountability, and redemption. Then there's Gloria, where he personifies his hidden as a woman, turning the relationship between artist and creativity into an intimate conversation. It's one of those records that reveals more every time you hear it. That's storytelling. Artists like Doechii continue experimenting with theatrical concepts and character-driven writing. Jid has records where his storytelling shines. Little Simz consistently builds worlds through her writing. There's also new artists like Earthsign Chels. They are keeping the tradition alive. The difference is, back then, storytelling was almost expected if you wanted to be considered one of the great lyricists. Today, it feels like an added-on bonus. And maybe that's why songs like Renee still resonate decades later, because they gave us characters. Think about the names we're still saying all these years later. Renee, Brenda, Stan, Aunt Dot, the woman from Love is Blind, the characters and Kash dolls for everybody. None of these people feel disposable. Whether fictional or inspired by real life, they stay with us because great writing creates emotional investment. That's something a playlist can't manufacture. As someone who loves hip-hop, I don't necessarily want everyone to start making music like it's 1996. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want artists recreating the past. I want artists to remember what made those records timeless, because hip-hop has always been more than beat, more than vibes, more than songs built to soundtrack a moment. Hip-hop has always been one of the greatest storytelling genres in music. It gave us characters we laughed with, characters we cried for, characters we mourned. It challenged us, it educated us, it entertained us, it made us feel. So maybe storytelling isn't dead. Maybe it's simply become a niche. Maybe the culture stopped rewarding it as much as it once did, but every time an artist slows down, creates a world, introduces us to unforgettable characters, and trusts the audience enough to follow the story, it reminds us exactly what hip-hop is capable of. Because when I listened to Renee again all these years later, I didn't just hear a classic song. I remembered why storytelling made me fall in love with hip-hop in the first place. So what do y'all think, cousins? Has storytelling become a lost art in hip-hop, or do you think it's simply evolved? And if there's a storyteller that's out today that deserves more recognition, let me know who they are in the comments. And I will catch y'all in my next one. Later.